John, we see three big mistakes that people sometimes make when they're thinking and purchasing insurance. And so today is a great day to talk about insurance mistakes. And let's get going with it. So, the first big insurance mistake is not having insurance. And we need to break that down a little bit because there's different types of insurance that maybe you'll decide you want to skip and different risks associated with that.
Yeah.
So the first type of insurance that you might decide to skip is medical insurance. Let's talk about that. What are your thoughts?
Don't. That's like that old Bob Newhart skit, right? Stop it. You go and I really appreciate this. It's kind of like there are some things that are legitimate to skip. And as you were saying that, Bridget, I was thinking it's the narrower the focus, right? Some of these, if I'm on a trip to Europe in the third week of June and something happens, then yeah, maybe that's the sort of insurance I don't want to have. But big picture things like health insurance. And
Right.
there's a lot of talk these days, right? Subsidies are at least scheduled to go away and prices have changed. I've seen, at least on the exchange price, just the actual price going up by a third. I mean, maybe some people are in a spot where they go, geez, maybe I just can't afford this. I'll go without. And to me, that's just a huge mistake. And from an insurability standpoint, maybe it goes back to what I was saying about, this really specific narrow thing that if I break
Right.
my left foot while I'm walking on a sidewalk, that I get covered. It's like, what's the likelihood, right? But what's the damage that gets happened or that gets done to me? And man, if you've got, you're in a car accident, you have a heart attack. We all know stories about, you see what the costs are of being in the hospital for a week before insurance, right? And you go like, listen, that can be so damaging to somebody's financial situation, like damaging to the point where you could never recover from it. So that sort of thing, you know what, you have to have some coverage, and maybe not full coverage for every little thing, but like catastrophic. Hey, if I'm in the hospital and I need a $300,000 surgery, I'm covered, sort of thing.
Yeah, this reminds me of a theoretical. Nobody likes theory, right? But when I learned when took an insurance class, we learned insurance theory. In insurance theory, the things you definitely want to cover are the things that are it's a low risk of happening, but a high cost if it does happen, right? So
Yeah.
having a catastrophic accident or stroke if you're young and that kind of stuff, it's low chance of it happening, but it would be potentially very high cost. So that's the
Right.
sweet spot for insurance. And so getting some sort of insurance just for the major stuff, even if you don't want to pay, you want to pay as little as possible for medical insurance, that's the way to go. I remember when I was out of college, I went to Europe for a while. And so it was between jobs. I didn't have any medical insurance. And so I got a cheaper policy. And I think these things are still available. Ideal would cover only if a major emergency, and they don't even do underwriting. They're like, sure, we'll insure you. They don't do underwriting until after you have an accident. So it's cheap. That makes it cheaper. They don't have to do anything.
Right.
So, but then, and we'll talk about this a little later, like they might be looking at that claim if you actually have one. So you want to make sure that you're aware of that when you go ahead and buy it. But having something was much better than just going without totally. Uh,
That's right.
so that's health insurance. What about life insurance?
Well, yeah, you talk about things that are, low probability, especially when you're younger, but very high cost. And we're thinking here about things like you have a family, especially young kids, right? You got, raise kids for the next 20 years. Especially if you're maybe the sole breadwinner in the family,
Even
or if, you and your spouse are 50-50, can you live on half your income, right? And again, low likelihood it happens, but people get in accidents. People have, health conditions that come up and a giant need, right? The cost of raising a family for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Huge cost if something happens to you. And it's life insurance, it's also disability, right? If it affects your ability to earn an income, right? If I'm dead, I can't make money, right? That's really clear. But also what happens if I, have a stroke and can't think, those sort of things. Again, hey, a lot of us don't like paying for insurance, right? I want to keep those costs down. I totally get it. It's talk about health insurance, talk about, oh, do I have to pay for life insurance? But man, the risk to your family is so huge that the answer is yeah, you have to have some.
okay, but that's a very specific category. And here's something that I personally resent. Okay, I see a lot of commercials for people that are my age or older saying, "Oh, honey, do you want some life insurance? This is this great policy. They don't have it, you know." You can get $100,000 without even any underwriting and blah, 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 blah. And not, I'm not saying that you would shouldn't never need that or never would want that, but that's totally optional. That's not something you need as far as I'm concerned, unless again you have dependents who are depending on you for their income. So that's when it's really I don't think there's a debate. That's when it's definitely necessary. But there's times that you might want life insurance because it'll make life easier for the, if you do pass away, but it's a different situation than when you have dependents.
Right, right. No, we used to say back when I was in that world, you need life insurance if you love somebody or if you owe somebody, right? Hey, I want to pay off the mortgage sort of thing if I die, or love somebody really means if somebody's dependent on my income, right? We're both
A lot
retired.
of people, John,
Nobody's,
but I
we're
don't
not depending on my income. Yeah, right. So,
life insurance.
um, so we get, health insurance, make sure you get health insurance, right? You can't go without that. Life insurance, if somebody depends on you, you need
Right.
to do that. The other thing I'll throw out there is renter's insurance. Seems like low hanging, like, geez, do we really need this? I mean, a lot of people renting will say, at least my situation, I don't have that much stuff. Look, what do we, but man, if you think
My
about if you lose
futon,
every,
yeah, right.
if you lose everything you own, right? I mean, not too long ago we bought a mattress, man, those things are expensive. And that's not including the frame that it goes on and the dresser and the couch I mean, it adds up. And you go, listen, for a few $100, just know that if there's a fire, again, low probability, but when it happens, it is hugely damaging, right? You go, hey, we see a lot of people without that, and that's just one, it just doesn't make sense to go without, as far as I'm
Yeah,
concerned.
I agree. Okay. So now here's the second category, and that is not having enough insurance.
Yeah.
Okay. And the big one I see, the first one I want to talk about is auto insurance. And sometimes people want cheap policies. And so, but then when you look at the coverage, it's basically the state minimum, which is okay for people without a lot of assets. But if you have some assets, you're going to want to be able to have a higher deductibility. Typically it goes, there's a minimum, which is like say 50,000. Next level is 100,000, and then the next level is 250 an incident and 500 for the total thing. And so depending on where you're at in your life, if you're just starting out, 50 can be okay. But once you have more than 50,000 in the net worth, then move up to the 100. And same with the 250, 500.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll expand that to just liability in general. Car is the big one, right? We're out there driving our cars on a consistent basis. Remember my dad saying when I first started driving, remember that's like a 2,000 pound missile going down the street, right? You got to be careful, right? And that's where we have to take a lot of risk. But then in other places too, having enough liability coverage on the car is the big one. At the house,
Yeah.
umbrella, or general liability coverage, right? That's again, you talk about low probability of a seriously damaging accident in those fashions, but very high damage if you're responsible for things, right? And so having enough liability with those car insurance limits, get those up in the 250 and $500,000 range, and then having a big umbrella policy to go over the top of that, right? To protect all the stuff you've built. It feels weird, like, oh, do I really need this much? And the answer is, yeah, get enough, right? So we talked first, get some, right? Have coverage, and then have enough, right? We hate, again, I hate paying for extra insurance, but when you are the person that's in an accident and you're getting sued and knowing that you have enough, right? That just makes such a big difference.
And just on the umbrella policy, I know it's a little jargony to even call it umbrella policy because it's not like you're insuring your umbrellas, although they are included. But it covers everything. If you
Yeah.
I just describe it because a lot of people that I talk to don't know what those are. And it's just the basic overall coverage of if I get sued and it's around me. And they usually come with, you have to have your home and auto at the same insurance company, not always, but uh, it's to because those are your two main areas of
I
possible risks, but it covers the other stuff too. Not professional liability, but it will cover your other personal liability.
Yeah.
All
The,
right.
the other thing about having enough coverage, I'll throw out there, is on the life insurance side, right? You got to have some. We talked about, especially small kids and young families sort of thing, and having enough. And $1 million sounds like a lot of money, and it certainly is if you win that in the lottery, right? But $1 million
Right,
isn't that much money to raise two kids for the next 20 years on,
right,
right? You think about the in terms of that, you go, holy mackerel, right? If my income's not here, and so oftentimes people need more life insurance than they think, right?
right.
It's probably not a couple $100,000 doesn't get the job done. And again, do you ever, what are the chances you need it? Low probability. But back in the old days when I was in the insurance business, I had to deliver some checks, and knowing that you have enough when you need it, you can't put a price on that. So make sure you get enough on that life insurance as well.
Right. And generally by term. I'll move on to last mistake, lying on forms. Okay. So when you get these insurance forms, you want to be honest with them, and you can read the fine print and make sure you're really answering the question that they're asking. But you don't want to exclude things, because then if you're trying to actually collect on this policy, they might come back and say, hey, this is what you said, this is what we insured you for, and this is not the case. So we don't want to cover it. And that's like, why? But then they'll give you a refund of how much you paid in premiums, but not actually what
That's right.
what the policy amount was. So
Right. Yeah, you explained a little bit on that on the insurance you were talking about on that trip in Europe. Not getting that, and it's just being honest. I mean, it sounds so dumb, like, oh, tell the truth of these things, but it's tempting to go like, oh, do you smoke cigarettes on your life insurance application or health insurance application? Well, well, not that many, that sort of thing, right? Have you done the and do you have this on your house or your car or things, or do you drive your car for work? No, I don't. Well, except for when I go here and there to a client, and then I'm in an accident, and the insurance company comes back and says, "Oh, that's not covered under your personal insurance. That was a business trip," right? Like those sorts of things. And you mentioned again that hey, some of these insurance policies, when there's no or little underwriting up front, it's easy to get, but then what
right,
happens on the back end? And it can be frustrating when you work with good companies. They do their homework up front, right? Why are they asking for all this information? Well,
right,
on the other end, again, you're talking about, hey, I need $1 million of life insurance to protect my family. I don't want them looking after I have some kind of crazy stroke or develop some kind of goofy cancer. I don't want them then going back and ordering the doctor's records. And I've had I had not a lot of them, but I had one case I can remember. We had gotten a client some insurance, life insurance, back when I was in that world, and 9 months, perfect health, everything looked great. 9 months later, he didn't wake up one morning, and
right,
they ordered 10 years worth of doctor's records. I remember piles of paper that we had to send in after the fact, looking to see, and it turned out that no, it was just one of those things. But do you really want them doing that homework then after the fact? Like, I want to know if I need $1 million of coverage, I want to know I got that, right?
right.
Same thing with the rest of our coverages. Be honest, go through the underwriting. You actually want a company that does all that work up front, even though it's a hassle, so that when you need the stuff, when you're in stress, whether it's a car accident, a home fire, or, somebody dies, that's not the time you want to be going through all that.
Right. Very good. So this is a great place to wrap it up. I'm Bridget Sullivan Ramel. I've got a family financial planning practice in Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm John Shear. I've got a fee only financial planning practice in Middleton, Wisconsin. And both Bridget and I are taking on new clients. We'd love to hear from you. But if you like what you hear on our show and would like to find an advisor who thinks similarly to us, we're both members of the Alliance of Comprehensive Planners, and you can find an advisor in your area by checking out acplanners.org.
Forget to subscribe.